Richard Sterling's corner office walls were covered with his Harvard Law diploma, prestigious awards, and photographs taken with New York's most powerful figures. In his 25-year career, there wasn't a case he had lost, and today would be no different. The young black woman sitting across from him was, in his eyes, just another idealistic rookie lawyer, probably someone who had finished law school on a government scholarship, talked big about civil rights, but had no clue about the real world. He had no idea that Zara Williams' calm demeanor, perfect diction, and academic achievements at Harvard were even higher than his own. He never thought that she spoke 3 languages fluently, was one of the country's youngest experts in constitutional law, or that her last name carried special meaning in the American legal system. Because the Williams surname belonged to one of the Supreme Court's most respected members for the past 10 years, Zara's father, Justice Samuel Williams. But when Sterling learned this, he would realize that he had lost not only this case, but his career's future as well. Because sometimes your biggest mistake is underestimating the person in front of you. Richard Sterling adjusted his Italian silk tie as he walked through the marble corridors of Manhattan Federal Courthouse. At 52, he had built his reputation on intimidating opposing counsel and dismantling their arguments with surgical precision. As senior partner at Sterling, Bradford and Associates, he was accustomed to facing the city's top legal minds, but today felt different, almost insultingly easy. His opponent was a 29-year-old black woman named Zara Williams, representing minority small business owners in a discrimination lawsuit against his client, Pinnacle Development Corporation. Sterling had done his research, or so he thought. Williams worked for a small civil rights firm in Brooklyn, had been practicing for only 4 years, and had never handled a case of this magnitude. Sterling entered the courtroom with his usual confidence, flanked by 2 junior associates. The sight that greeted him almost made him chuckle. Zara Williams sat alone at the plaintiff's table, a single legal pad in front of her, wearing a modest navy suit. She was reviewing notes, completely absorbed in her work. "Miss Williams, I presume?" Sterling approached with a condescending smile. "Richard Sterling. I was expecting more representation." Zara looked up, her dark eyes meeting his with steady composure. "Mr. Sterling, one lawyer is sufficient when the law is on your side." Sterling's smile widened. How refreshingly naive. This is federal court, not traffic court in Brooklyn. What Sterling didn't know was that Zara Williams had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School, where she had served as the first black woman editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Review in over a decade. She had turned down offers from every major firm in the country, including Sterling's own. Judge Patricia Morrison entered the courtroom, and everyone rose. Judge Morrison, a 15-year veteran of the federal bench, was known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for theatrics. She had seen countless cases and could spot unprepared attorneys from across the room. "Please be seated. We're here for the case of Rodriguez et al., via Pinnacle Development Corporation. Mr. Sterling, you may present your opening statement." Sterling rose with theatrical flair, buttoning his jacket as he approached the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're about to witness a textbook example of frivolous litigation. My client, Pinnacle Development, is a respected company that has revitalized neighborhoods throughout New York City. The plaintiffs, led by their enthusiastic counsel, would have you believe that business decisions based on economic realities constitute discrimination." He gestured dismissively toward Zara. "You'll hear emotional appeals and idealistic rhetoric from the plaintiff's side, but this courtroom deals in facts, not feelings. And the facts will show that Pinnacle's decisions were purely economic." Sterling continued for 20 minutes, his voice dripping with condescension whenever he referenced the plaintiff's counsel or opposing counsel's inexperience. Several times he made subtle references to Zara's youth and implied lack of understanding of how business really worked. When Sterling finished, Judge Morrison nodded toward Zara. "Ms. Williams, your opening statement." Zara rose slowly, smoothing her jacket. She walked to the center of the courtroom, not approaching the jury with Sterling's aggressive posture, but standing with quiet authority. "Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Zara Williams, And I represent 12 families whose American dreams were crushed not by market forces, but by deliberate discrimination. Her voice was clear, strong, and carried an authority that filled the room. Miss Sterling is correct about one thing. This courtroom does deal in facts, and the facts will show that Pinnacle Development systematically targeted minority-owned businesses for displacement, offering buyout prices 40% below market value, while offering white-owned businesses in identical situations fair market prices or above. Sterling's confident smile began to fade as Zara continued. We will present documented evidence, including internal emails, where Pinnacle executives used racial slurs to describe the business owners they were displacing. We will show you the company's own demographic studies, which they used not to ensure fair treatment, but to identify which neighborhoods had the least political resistance to their tactics. Zara's presentation was methodical, precise, and devastating. She spoke without notes referencing specific case law, constitutional precedents, and statistical analysis, with the fluency of someone who had lived and breathed this material for years. Mr. Sterling speaks of economic reality. The economic reality is that his clients saw minority business owners as easier targets because they assumed, wrongly, that these families lacked the resources to fight back. They assumed, again wrongly, that their actions would go unchallenged because they believed no one would care about a few small businesses in Brooklyn and Queens. Sterling felt something he hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty. This wasn't the performance of an inexperienced lawyer. This was the work of someone who understood the law at its deepest level. But they underestimated something fundamental, Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. They underestimated the principle that justice doesn't recognize the size of your business or the color of your skin. Justice recognizes right from wrong. When Zara finished her opening statement, the courtroom was silent. Even Sterling's associates looked uncomfortable. Judge Morrison nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Miss Williams. Mr. Sterling, call your first witness." Sterling's first witness was Pinnacle's CEO, David Hartwell, a polished executive who had been coached for his testimony. Sterling walked him through the company's business model and economic justifications for the buyouts. "Ms. Hartwell, can you explain why Pinnacle offered different prices to different business owners? Each property is unique. We consider location, foot traffic, building condition. These are standard business considerations. And race played no factor? Absolutely not. Pinnacle is an equal opportunity company. Thank you. Nothing further." Judge Morrison looked to Zara. "Ms. Williams, your witness." Zara approached with a folder. "Mr. Hartwell, you testified that race played no factor in your decisions." "That's right." Zara opened her folder. "I'm showing you Plaintiff's Exhibit 47. Do you recognize this email?" Hartwell's face went pale. "This appears to be an internal communication. An internal email from your development director to you, dated March 15th. Would you please read the highlighted portion?" Sterling jumped up. "Objection. Your Honor, this document hasn't been properly authenticated." "Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell can authenticate this document. It was sent to his company email." Overruled. The witness will read the highlighted portion. Hartwell's voice was barely audible. "It says, the Rodriguez Strip Mall is perfect. The tenants are mostly minority-owned, so they won't put up much of a fight. These people don't have the resources to cause problems." A murmur went through the courtroom. Sterling felt his stomach drop. "Miss Hartwell, are these people the business owners my clients represent?" I didn't write this email." "No, but you received it. And what was your response?" Zara handed him another document. "This is your reply sent 3 minutes later." Hartwell read reluctantly. "Good thinking. Let's lowball them and see what happens. They'll probably be grateful for whatever we offer." The damage was immediate and severe. Sterling watched as his client's credibility evaporated in real time. But Zara wasn't finished. "Miss Hartwell, I'm now showing you Plaintiff's Exhibit 52, another internal email from your development team. This one discusses the Patterson family's grocery store. Would you read the highlighted portion?" "I'd rather not." Judge Morrison's voice was firm. "You'll read it, Mr. Hartwell. It says, the black family that owns the grocery store is asking questions about our offer. Should we be concerned? And then my response, don't worry. They don't have the legal resources to challenge us. Just stick to the lowball offer. Sterling was watching his case collapse in real time. This wasn't just bad testimony. This was career-ending evidence. Zara continued her methodical destruction of Pinnacle's defense. Miss Hartwell, in contrast, when the Kowalski family, who are white, asked questions about their buyout offer for a property of identical size and condition in the same development zone. What did your company do? I don't recall specifically. Let me refresh your memory. Zara presented another document. This email shows that your company immediately increased their offer by 30% and provided them with detailed comparable sales data. Did you provide the same information to any of the minority business owners? I don't believe so. In fact, when Ms. Rodriguez asked for comparable sales data, what was your development director's response? Hartwell was sweating now. I don't remember. The response was, and I quote, "Tell her we don't have to justify our offers to her. Take it or leave it." Is that correct? Yeah. By the time Zara finished her cross-examination, Pinnacle's case was in ruins. Sterling watched helplessly as witness after witness crumbled under Zara's precise questioning. She had done something he had rarely seen in federal court. She had prepared so thoroughly that she knew the case better than the opposing party knew their own business. During the lunch recess, Sterling cornered one of Hartwell's executives in the hallway. How the hell did she get those internal emails? Who is this woman? I don't know, but she's destroying us. Maybe we should consider settlement. Settlement. I don't settle cases to rookie lawyers half my age. But Sterling's confidence was shaken. This wasn't the performance of a rookie. As he researched Zara Williams during the break, he discovered details that made his blood run cold. Harvard Law Review Editor-in-Chief, Constitutional Law Scholarship published in the Yale Law Journal, clerkships with 2 federal circuit judges who were widely respected throughout the legal community. However, he still didn't know the most important detail, who her father was. Let's pause here and return to that critical realization. Sterling had built his career on the assumption that pedigree and connections trumped everything in the legal world. He had Harvard credentials, the right client base, and the right social circle. What he was about to learn was that real legal talent, combined with actual pedigree, not the kind you buy but the kind you inherit from a lifetime of commitment to justice, was an entirely different force. The afternoon session resumed with Zara presenting her case. Her witnesses were devastating. Each business owner testified with dignity and precision about the discrimination they had faced. But Zara's masterstroke came when she called Dr. Patricia Hamilton, an economics professor from Columbia University, as an expert witness. Hamilton had analyzed Pinnacle's buyout offers using statistical models that demonstrated clear racial disparities. Her testimony was unassailable, her credentials impeccable, and her conclusions damning. Sterling's cross-examination was brutal. Hamilton, isn't it true that you've testified exclusively for civil rights plaintiffs? I testify in cases where statistical analysis reveals discrimination, but that suggests bias, doesn't it? Dr. Hamilton's response was devastating. Miss Sterling, when a doctor diagnoses cancer repeatedly, it doesn't mean the doctor is biased toward finding cancer. It means cancer exists. When I find statistical evidence of racial discrimination, it doesn't mean I'm biased. It means discrimination exists. The turning point came during Sterling's closing argument. Desperate to regain control, he made a fatal error. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you not to be swayed by emotional appeals or social justice activism. He gestured toward Zara dismissively. Williams represents lawyers who see racism everywhere because it serves their political agenda. This is federal court, not a college campus. We deal in business realities here, not theories from sensitivity training seminars. Sterling's closing was a masterclass in everything wrong with the old guard legal establishment. Cheese Morrison's face was stoned. Several jurors looked visibly uncomfortable. When it was Zara's turn for closing arguments, she rose with quiet dignity. Members of the jury, Miss Sterling just told you that seeking justice for racial discrimination is fashionable. Activism. He suggested that fighting for equal treatment under the law is somehow inappropriate for federal court. Her voice carried a power that seemed to fill every corner of the courtroom. But this courtroom exists precisely because our founders understood that justice cannot be fashionable or unfashionable. Justice simply is. Zara walked closer to the jury, her composure unshakable. Mr. Sterling suggests that I represent a generation that sees racism everywhere. I represent 12 families who experienced racism in the most concrete way possible. In their bank accounts, in their businesses, in their children's futures. She turned toward Sterling's table, but Mr. Sterling is correct about one thing. I do represent something different from his generation of lawyers. I represent the belief that the law belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford corner offices and Italian suits. The power in her voice grew with each sentence. I represent the principle that your worth as an American isn't measured by the connections you inherited, but by the justice you seek to create. I represent the idea that this courtroom, our courtroom, America's courtroom, belongs as much to Miss Rodriguez and her grocery store as it does to Pinnacle Development Corporation. Zara's closing argument was a tour de force of legal advocacy and moral authority. When she finished, the courtroom was silent, except for the sound of several jurors wiping their eyes. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, unusually quick for a complex federal case. They returned with a verdict that exceeded even Zara's expectations: full compensatory damages, punitive damages against Pinnacle, and an injunction requiring the company to offer fair market value to all displaced business owners. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom after the verdict. I want to note for the record that this case represents both outstanding advocacy by counsel and a clear example of why civil rights enforcement remains essential in our legal system. She looked directly at Sterling. Miss Sterling, your closing argument suggested that civil rights law is somehow less legitimate than other areas of federal law. I want to be clear that in my courtroom, the Constitution applies equally to all Americans, regardless of the size of their business or their legal representation. Then Judge Morrison did something unusual. She looked at Zara with visible respect. Ms. Williams, your representation of these plaintiffs has been exemplary. Your preparation, your legal analysis, and your courtroom advocacy represent the highest traditions of the American bar. After the verdict, Sterling gathered his materials in stunned silence. 25 years of victories had conditioned him to expect different outcomes. As he packed his briefcase, he overheard 2 court reporters talking. Did you see Justice Williams in the gallery during closing arguments? Justice Williams was here. Which one? Samuel Williams, the Supreme Court Justice. He must have slipped in during the afternoon session. I've never seen him at a regular federal trial before. Sterling's blood turned to ice. Justice Samuel Williams, the Samuel Williams who had authored some of the most important civil rights decisions of the past decade. The Samuel Williams who was widely regarded as the Supreme Court's most brilliant legal mind. Why would a Supreme Court justice attend a civil rights trial in Manhattan? I heard someone say the plaintiff's attorney is his daughter. Sterling felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Zara Williams, Justice Samuel Williams. The connection he had been too arrogant to investigate, too dismissive to consider. He turned around slowly and saw a distinguished black man in his early 60s, standing near the back of the courtroom, wearing a simple gray suit. Even without his judicial robes, Justice Samuel Williams commanded unmistakable authority. He was talking quietly to Zara, his pride evident in every gesture. Sterling watched as Justice Williams embraced his daughter, whispering something in her ear that made her smile. The same woman Sterling had dismissed as an inexperienced activist was the daughter of one of the most powerful judicial figures in America. But the crushing realization went deeper than that. Justice Williams wasn't just any Supreme Court justice. He was the justice who had written the majority opinion in Crawford v. Henderson Industries, the landmark case that had established the legal framework Zara had used to destroy Pinnacle's defense. Sterling had been outmaneuvered, not just by superior preparation, but by someone who had literally grown up understanding civil rights law at the constitutional level. Sterling's junior associate approached him nervously. Mr. Sterling, The Pinnacle executives are asking about appeal options. Sterling looked at his associate with the hollow stare of a man whose worldview had just collapsed. Here are no appeal options. We were outclassed in every possible way. As Sterling left the courthouse, he passed Justice Williams and Zara in the corridor. The justice looked at him with the measured gaze of someone who had spent decades observing human nature from the highest bench in the land. "Mr. Sterling," Justice Williams said quietly, "I attended today's proceedings because my daughter asked me to observe her work. I want you to know that her victory today had nothing to do with her family name and everything to do with her talent." Sterling nodded, unable to speak. Justice Williams continued, "But I also want you to understand something. When you dismissed civil rights law as fashionable activism in your closing argument, you weren't just insulting my daughter. You were insulting the Constitution she has sworn to defend." The justice's voice remained calm, but its authority was unmistakable. "I've been watching lawyers for 40 years, Mr. Sterling. The best ones understand that the law is a sacred trust. They treat every case, every client, and every opposing counsel with the respect that the law demands." Justice Williams looked at his daughter with visible pride. "Zara chose civil rights law not because it was fashionable, but because she understands that justice isn't a luxury available only to those who can afford the finest representation. Justice is a right that belongs every American." He turned back to Sterling. "Today you learned that lesson the hard way." 3 months later, Sterling's law firm quietly settled a dozen other civil rights cases rather than risk facing Zara Williams in court again. Word had spread throughout New York's legal community about the young civil rights lawyer who had dismantled one of the city's most arrogant attorneys. The humiliation Sterling had experienced forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own assumptions and prejudice. He began taking pro bono cases, something he had never done in 25 years of practice. He started mentoring young lawyers from diverse backgrounds. 6 months after the trial, Sterling received an unexpected phone call from Zara Williams, referring a corporate client to him. After their courtroom confrontation, she was still professional enough to recognize his expertise where it was needed. "People can change, Mr. Sterling," she told him. "The law teaches us to judge actions, not assumptions." A year later, at the annual New York Bar Association dinner, Zara was recognized as the Young Lawyer of the Year. In her acceptance speech, she said something that stayed with Sterling forever. "Justice isn't about winning or losing. Justice is about recognizing the dignity and worth of every person who walks into our courtrooms." After the dinner, Justice Williams approached Sterling privately. "A year ago you dismissed civil rights law in federal court. Tonight, you're referring clients to civil rights attorneys. That's not just professional growth, that's moral growth." 2 years later, Sterling found himself testifying before Congress on judicial diversity, sitting beside Zara Williams, who was now being considered for federal bench appointment. During his testimony, Sterling said, "I learned that being a lawyer isn't about the pedigree you display on your office wall. It's about the justice you seek to create in your courtroom. I learned that lesson from an opponent who taught me that real legal talent is earned through dedication to principles larger than yourself." When the hearing ended, Sterling and Zara walked out together. "That first day in court, when I was so dismissive, did you know then that you were going to win?" Zara smiled. "Richard, I knew I was going to win the moment you assumed I could. Not because of my father or connections, but because you underestimated the power of preparation, truth, and justice. Those things don't care about your last name, they care about your commitment to them."